So ever since I first thought of Once a Duck, one of the first guests I even had reached out to, talked to, threw this out as a concept is someone most Duck fans have probably seen at some point, either scoring on a 2-point conversion or making a clutch snap on a clutch field goal or PAT, but most people wouldn't recognize him on the street or even remember his name. With me, we have Jeff Palmer. Jeff, how are you doing?
I'm good, man. Good to catch up, and I'm excited to be on.
Man, it is so great to have you, especially going into Arizona week, and a lot of us know why. But before we get to that, you have a unique story, not just because you're a long snapper, but your journey to Oregon. Could you tell me what brought you to the Oregon Ducks as a long snapper?
Yeah. So my recruiting process was pretty interesting story, and I enjoyed listening to all your stories about your recruiting trip to UW and everything a couple episodes back. But I had a very interesting recruiting experience just because of being a long snapper. So in high school, I played football and volleyball. Volleyball is obviously a big Southern California, and made a decision about halfway through sophomore year that football was the route for me. I knew I could probably get college paid for, so started doing long snapping lessons. And I still played linebacker and safety and stuff like that, but knew actually snapping in college was a way to get school paid for, and probably where I could get to where I wanted to go to. So started focusing on that primarily about halfway through sophomore year and my sophomore year, and had a lot of interest from a ton of schools. I was, looking back on the rankings, I was second or third in my grade. In fact, our kicker that was in our class, Rob Beard, his best friend was the number one long snapper in our class and is still in the NFL, Aaron Brewer. So it was a crazy kind of connection how I met Rob Beard, knowing like basically his best friend being the best long snapper in my grade. And so him and I got a lot of attention from various schools. And fast forward a little bit, the first school that showed a ton of interest was Duke. And essentially right after they started showing all their interest, their whole staff got fired. And I had kind of stopped responding to a bunch of other schools because after my visit, my parents were pretty all in on me going to Duke. And then the call that I, hoped and prayed about for years came because I grew up a massive USC fan. And so Coach Carroll, called me and had me come up for a visit, and, met all the USC legends from that run, Mark Sanchez and that whole crew. And, had a great time visiting USC, and they never, sent over a letter of intent or told me, you have a full scholarship offer or you're a preferred walk-on or what. They basically just kept stringing me along throughout the recruiting process and saying like, no, we're going to get you into the school. Like, stop talking to all the other schools. You're a Trojan. You're in. And about mid-May, I was up there for a spring practice, and their secondary coach kind of pulled me aside, and it was a coach that I never really had a relationship with, and said, hey, we are going another direction. We really want you to go to Saddleback for 2 years, Saddleback JC for 2 years, and see where things stand after that. And basically come to find out they had a D lineman that, cleared NCAA clearinghouse at the last second. That's why they were stringing me along with my scholarship and everything is they didn't want to give away that spot if this guy ended up getting cleared. And so that happened on like a Saturday, and my phone rang on Tuesday, and it was Mike Bellotti. And I was driving home from the gym, and it was Mike Bellotti calling me. And obviously, like, that was the year that Oregon, at that point, had only lost to Cal. It was the Dennis Dixon year, so it was 2007. And basically, I had followed them that whole season just because I was keeping my options open. And so long story short, Bellotti had me up for a visit, and I fell in love with the school right away. I sat in his office and talked to him for like a half hour, toured the facilities, and came back into his office maybe, 3 hours later. And he's like, all right, well, if you want to come here. And I like cut him off. I was like, oh no, I'm definitely coming here. Like, committed right on the spot. And that was that. So long-winded story, basically saying, Bilotti contacted me on a Tuesday. I came up there the following weekend for a visit, and I was enrolled in summer school with all you guys less than 10 days later. So pretty crazy story.
Yeah, man. And what I remember most about you is you're what Coach Kelly described to guys as a glue guy. You really were a part of our class that everybody gelled with and got along with because who doesn't love the long snapper? But you're also the smallest guy in stature that I got to line up next to at almost any level of football. What's it like just being out there, kind of being at practice, doing your own thing with the special teams guys, just being a different mold of football player than, obviously a guy like me, it stands out. People know I play football when they look at me. But what was it like for you?
Yeah, it was kind of an interesting experience, and I always laughed about it because I had you lining up next to me. I had Mark Asper. I had Darian Weems. I had all massive human beings lining up next to me on field goal, and I was smaller than my punter Jackson. I was smaller than Rob Beard. The only kicker that was ever bigger or that was ever smaller than me was Morgan Flint. So pretty funny experience, I guess, just seeing me out there amongst all the massive O linemen and even my punter and kicker being bigger than me, I thought was always pretty funny. So.
And you, despite your size, had some of the most awesome highlight reels of any long snapper ever, including, my most memorable or some of the big plays you got to be a part of on PATs where we got to make crazy things up, especially that national championship game. And then when you got to catch the 2-point conversion against Stanford in 2011, that's one of my favorites. What stands out as your single favorite moment?
So I was down in Portland and saw Rob Beard a few months back, actually for Tim Taylor's wedding. And the night before the national championship game came up, and we had both never really watched the highlights, and his 2-point conversion came in. That'll always be a highlight for me, is just the fact that we got to run that in the national championship game. That's one that will always stick out. And then obviously my 2-point conversion. The whole story about that happening is a great story because Chip always liked me. There's a lot of guys, when interacting with Chip that they thought Chip hated him or didn't have a relationship with him. But it's because he was so focused on his day to day, but he always, in passing people in the hallways, he knew everyone's name. He made sure to say what's up, but he wasn't going to stroke any guys' egos. And I think I always understood that. Like, I was a long snapper. He's not going to talk to me on a day-to-day basis. But it was during a Friday walkthrough. He asked me basically, "Are you an athlete?" And I was like, "What are you talking about?" Like, "Yes, I'm an athlete." And he's like, "Do you have hands?" And I was like, "Yeah, you always see us, you always come and mess around with a specialist and I have hands, and you've commented on that before." He's like, "I know, I just want to see if you're confident enough to do this." And he's like, "I have a crazy idea that I want to call." And he basically drew it up right then. And I don't know if you remember this or if you were there for that, but it was the Washington week, the week before Stanford.
Uh-huh.
And so basically he drew it up right then and there. And then, we hadn't even talked about it in any of Greatwood's meetings. We had those 2 meetings leading up to the game each week. And Chip basically came in and drew it up on a napkin and said, "I really want to do this. And so we're going to do it." And so we ended up not running it at UW, that weekend, but the following week after our first touchdown at Stanford, Coach Greatwood just walks up and is like, "Fuck it, we're running it."
I love it.
It was just hilarious. I was like, "Oh shit, this is happening." So, it's just a hilarious story, and still can't believe I caught it, and still can't believe Paulson threw that perfect of a ball.
Man.
Crazy.
You mossed it, man. I dude, the best part is I didn't have a doubt. I just didn't really know what the hell was going on that play because, yeah, like you said, Chip had basically drawn it up on a napkin. And in our, we had 2 meetings a week field goal. And yeah, guys kind of knew what was going on, but there were a couple options to it that I remember. I remember thinking okay, does Jeff have it? Oh man, Jeff just got it. Very first touchdown of the game, it blew everyone away, and it set the standard for that night. Also, going on to the fact you just moved up to Seattle, I just found out. What's it like in your short experiences so far, being an ex-Duck and having to live up here in Husky Nation?
I love it, man. So I actually married a Husky. I don't know if you knew that part either. And her family lives in Montlake, like right across from the stadium, like not even 500 feet from the stadium, just right on the other side of the cut right there. And so, you know, we've dated for 3.5, 4 years, whatever, before we got married. And so it's been a thing. And, you know, obviously right when we started dating was basically Oregon's downfall. And so they went 2-0 against us the first 2 years we met. And then now we're the past 2 years. So it was rough for the last few years, but it's fun living up here, man. I don't have as many on the street interactions as I think you do. I heard you talking about it, and obviously I crack up at your Twitter timeline all the time. But it's so fun talking to all of Molly's friends, and especially, you know, all the guy friends that are diehard Husky fans, just talking trash and ragging on Chris Peterson and all that good stuff.
Well, congratulations, and I'm sorry at the same time. The next 10 years could get a little rocky until she gets her next two.
Yep. It's looking that way. I love every second of it.
Jeff, I kind of want to be able to ask you something from the perspective of an individual who wasn't able to be in those practices, wasn't able to be out there on the sidelines or on the field with you. The Chip Kelly, as a coach, he's known for being very creative in special teams and on these special teams type plays, whether it's an onside kick in the second or third quarter, whether it is going for two and having the ball thrown up to a long snapper. What is that process every day in practice, just preparing yourself for these type of occurrences? And then when you hear it called in the game, what are those emotions when you're running out on the field, knowing that you're going to try something a little bit crazy or a little bit out of left field?
Yeah, it was always pretty interesting because as specialists, we obviously have a lot more time to sit around and like watch film and watch other specialists and critique them. But we all got pretty good at drawing up certain things, and like we would bring all those things up to Chip, and he was like willing to listen. And part of one of the big things that I appreciated about Chip, just from like a specialist perspective, is that the only reason he like really liked doing the swinging gates, and he said this publicly a ton of times, is like, even if we never run it, it's 20 minutes during the week that the other team has to spend scheming against it. So it's 20 less minutes that they're practicing, third and long or some other period that they normally are practicing on a week-to-week basis. And so that's just one of the many examples of like how creative Chip is and how much of an edge he's trying to get. Everything from practicing in the morning so we have longer to recover, or, making the other team sacrifice 20 minutes of practice time to scheme against our swinging gates. Just all sorts of things like that you have to appreciate about being around Chip on a day-to-day basis.
So one of the reasons we brought you on isn't necessarily one of your finest moments, but it's definitely one of the most memorable. Down at Arizona, 2009. What do you remember from that day in particular, and that snap that was so crucial that Nate Costa just barely got down in time for us to be able to send it to that 3 overtime thriller?
Yeah, that was an unbelievable day. I have a lot of crazy memories because so many kids from my high school go to Arizona or went to Arizona. I think there were like 17 kids from my graduating class that were at Arizona. And so I remember seeing them, like they'd walk over to our side and like wave and stuff like that. So I remember, especially during the 2-minute drive, them starting to come on the field. And here's something I'll preface before we even talk about the snap. I never got nervous or like thought about the ramifications that specific snap had. I get asked about it a lot, and I've told the story so many times because that's the first question people ask is like, did you ever have a bad snap? And I bring up the video and I show them the 2-minute drive and all that stuff. But it wasn't because I was like nervous or anything of that nature. It just like happened to be at that point that I had, the worst snap of my career. But Nate did save me, and I'm reminded about it all the time. But going back to the memories, I just thought it was absolutely hilarious. The student section coming on the field. I remember a couple of the ballsy play calls that Chip had during the 2-minute drive. I remember Jerron Kreiner kind of tearing us apart. I believe he took a slant like 70 yards with 4 or 5 minutes left, and I was like, damn, that's game over. Like, But then, we come around, we have the 2-minute drive. Ed Dixon has that awesome touchdown, and then just took over in overtime. But unbelievable game, and basically sealed the Rose Bowl right then and there. I always tell people, I almost single-handedly cost us that first Rose Bowl.
Damn, man. Don't go too hard on yourself, man. You still get it. It wasn't that bad. It could have been worse. Oh,
it could have
man.
been really bad.
But yeah, thinking back on that moment, everybody's dogpiling on Mazzoli. Those emotions take over. What's it like? When was the moment that you kind of realized? Was it film? Was it, or did you know right away after the game, like, man, that's something I'm gonna have a talk with Coach Oz about?
Oh, he let me know about it right when I walked to the sideline. I mean, he's the type of guy you don't really get yelled at by, but he just gives you that look. Same with Coach Rad. Those are just guys you don't want to disappoint. So when I got that look right when getting to the sideline, I was like, I don't know, Coach. That was the first bad snap I've had in months. It was really weird. I can never explain it, but no, I knew right away, and I knew that I deserved all the shit I got the next couple of weeks. So.
Man, so one real last question, and I'm glad you brought up Coach Rad. Coach Oz is so busy coaching so many different special teams and the tight ends, so many hats he was wearing. A lot of the time in practice, we'd look over and Coach Rad would just have you special teamers doing some of the wildest, most intense drills, and I would be just sitting back. It'd be O-line would be talking through protections or walking through some things. I'd be just so glad I didn't have to endure that. What was it like working with Coach Rad so much more than the rest of us during practice?
It was hilarious, man. And it was like the same first 20 minutes of practice, 4 days a week, besides the Friday walkthroughs, were literally the exact same things, the exact amount of reps. And the only thing he would switch up was the type of tackling drill that we would do. It was just hilarious, man. I always say my hips will never be that loose again because we were always doing the over-unders on the hurdles and doing all these crazy stretches. He's hilarious, man. But I think the thing that I appreciated the most looking back about Coach Rad is all the mental work that we did. I think that's why we performed at a pretty high level. And even now, I love meditating and I love visualizing things and doing various breathing exercises. And I think if he hadn't turned me on to that, I would have thought it was kind of weird before and probably wouldn't be doing it today. So one of the many things I have Coach Rad to thank for.
Oh, man. Yeah, man. Coach Rad was definitely special. Well, Jeff, thank you for coming on Once a Duck. I want to start a very special tradition. Most of the time, we're going to close out with a Go Ducks, but I think since we have a little bit of a thing with special teams, I'm just going to say, special teams!
Be special.
Thank you, Jeff. Go Ducks.
Go Ducks, man. Talk to you guys soon.
Yep. Thank you, man.
Yep.
So there is that spread. 1 point or two. They snap it. They're going to throw for two. The trickery. Caught. Got it. It's 8-0. They throw back to Jeff Palmer.
That's the thing with these guys.
They always come up with a new wrinkle.
It's crazy. You've got the holder out there. Go ahead, Brent.
Well, over here you've got Paulson, the tight end. He chucks it.
And Paulson
to Palmer. Did you have that written down in your card that this was the play?
I've got it all. Yeah,
That's
yeah. Paulson played quarterback in high school. So, he has some experience throwing the ball, but you never know, again, what you're going to expect to see from Oregon, even early in a game like this.